The West had a way of stripping people down to their essentials. By late afternoon, the sun bled gold across the plains, turning Dry Creek into something almost beautiful again. Wind moved through the tall grass in slow waves, and the mountains in the distance stood quiet and watchful, unchanged by empires, untouched by ambition. Miles rode beside Wren in silence. She hadn't planned to let him come. But when he showed up that morning, boots dusty, sleeves rolled, no lawyers, no phone glued to his hand, she found herself nodding before she could stop herself. They rode the fence line together, checking posts and water access points, work that demanded presence rather than words. Miles struggled at first, unfamiliar with the rhythm of physical labor. But he didn't complain. He listened. He learned. And Wren noticed. "You don't have to prove anything," she said eventually, tightening a wire. "I'm not trying to," he replied. "I just need to understand what I've been standing on." She glanced at him, surprised by the honesty. They reached the old ridge by midday, where the land dipped and rose like a scar across the earth. From there, Dry Creek stretched wide and endless. "My mother used to bring me here," Wren said quietly. "She said the land remembers who respects it." Miles removed his hat, letting the wind run through his hair. "My father said land was leverage," he answered. "Something you controlled or lost." She scoffed softly. "Figures." They dismounted and sat on the ground, the space between them charged but unforced. For once, Miles didn't feel the urge to fill the silence. "This place, it does something to you," he admitted. "Back in the city, everything I built felt permanent. Concrete, steel, numbers. And here?" she asked. "Here," he said slowly, "it feels small." Wren studied him, really studied him. The sharp edges of power she'd expected were softened by fatigue and thought. For the first time, she saw the man without the empire shadowing him. "You're not who I thought you were," she said. He smiled faintly. "You're not either." Clouds rolled in unexpectedly, dark and heavy. Thunder growled in the distance. "We should head back," Wren said. "Storm's coming fast." They barely made it to the old barn before the sky broke open. Rain hammered the tin roof, loud and relentless. Wind pushed through the cracks in the wood, carrying the scent of wet soil and wild grass. They stood close, breaths visible in the sudden cool. "This place," Miles said, voice raised over the storm, "is why you won't sell." "Yes," she replied, "and because it's all I have left of them." He stepped closer, not touching her. "I'm sorry for what my family did." "I know," she said. "That's what scares me." He frowned. "Why?" "Because if you were heartless, this would be easier." Thunder cracked overhead, and the barn shuddered. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The danger outside mirrored the one inside, emotion, raw and unguarded. "Miles," she said softly, "this land ruined my family. Your name ruined my family." "I know," he said, "and yet here I am, wanting something I can't own." Her breath caught. "This isn't about money anymore," he continued. "I don't know when it happened. Somewhere between the dust and the truth and the way you stand your ground, I started questioning everything." She looked away, afraid of the pull she felt. "I don't fall for men like you," she said. "And I don't fall at all," he replied. "Until now." The storm eased slowly, rain softening to a whisper. Wren turned back to him. "If this goes any further, it won't be safe." "I know," he said. "And if I get hurt?" His voice was steady. "Then I stay." Something shifted then, quiet, profound. She reached for his hand. Not a promise, not forgiveness, but permission. Outside, the West breathed again, wide and unyielding. And within that vast, unforgiving land, two hearts began to beat in rhythm. Dangerously, honestly, and against every rule either of them had ever lived by. Because the heart of the West wasn't found in land deeds or empires. It lived in truth, in courage, and in the moment someone chose to stand beside you, no matter the cost. The morning sun burned weakly over Dry Creek, cutting through the mist that clung stubbornly to the valleys. Miles rode alone, the weight of a letter pressing against his chest. It wasn't the words that terrified him, it was the implications. Wren had been right. The deed she'd found, buried beneath layers of old contracts and forgotten signatures, exposed a betrayal bigger than he could have imagined. His father hadn't just mismanaged the land. He had colluded with men who profited from Wren's family's ruin, weaving deception into a contract no one would question until decades later. Miles stopped at the old stone fence that marked the edge of her property. He traced the cracks with a calloused finger. "I can't let this be undone. Not without consequences," he muttered. Wren approached, dust clinging to her boots, eyes sharp. "You got my letter," she said. "Yes," he said. "And I need to tell you everything." She crossed her arms. "I already know most of it. That your father, that your family, betrayed yours," he finished quietly. "I didn't know until recently, and now, I have a choice. Fix it and risk my empire, or ignore it and live with the guilt forever." Her gaze softened, but she didn't move closer. "You can't fix it for me, only for yourself. But you can stand beside me." Miles swallowed hard. "And if standing beside you means losing everything I've built?" "You already know the answer," she replied. "Some things are bigger than money, bigger than power, bigger than pride." They walked through the fields together, the wind carrying the scent of wet earth and wild sage. Silence stretched, heavy with what remained unspoken. He finally spoke. "I was raised to control outcomes, to win, to manipulate. But here the rules are different. You can't buy loyalty, you can't buy trust, and you can't buy a second chance at something that was stolen." Wren looked up at him, eyes glimmering with unshed tears. "Then what will you do?" Miles clenched his fists. "I choose the hard way. I choose to set it right, even if it costs me everything." Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, echoing the storm inside him. The empire he'd built in glass towers and boardrooms now felt fragile, insignificant compared to the truth standing before him. "And if the people who took everything come for you?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "Then I fight," he said, eyes steady. "Not just for me, not just for Wren, but for what's right, for the land, for your family, for the past that never deserved to be buried in silence." For the first time in years, Miles felt powerless, and it terrified him. But it also clarified everything, because some truths demanded courage over comfort, justice over ambition, and sometimes love over legacy. Wren extended her hand. Miles took it without hesitation. The wind swept across Dry Creek, carrying the dust of old secrets and the scent of new beginnings. And in that moment, two hearts braced themselves against the storm, ready to face the dangerous truth together, no matter the cost. The sun dipped low over Dry Creek, painting the horizon in streaks of orange and crimson. Dust swirled along the old trails, kicked up by a convoy of black trucks rolling toward the outskirts of Wren's land. Miles watched from the ridge, heart pounding. The people behind the stolen deeds and secret contracts had realized he was interfering, and they were coming for him. Wren stood beside him, hands on her hips, eyes fierce. "You can't fight them alone," she said, voice steady but tinged with worry. "I don't plan to," Miles replied. "But I have to make them see that some things, some people can't be bought, threatened, or broken." The first truck arrived, dust clouding the Dry Creek bed. Men in sharp suits spilled out, papers and threats in hand, ready to seize what they thought was rightfully theirs. Miles dismounted, walking slowly toward them, the weight of his empire and his conscience pressing down on him. Wren stepped forward, her voice carrying across the open land. "You won't touch this land. You won't take what doesn't belong to you." The leader of the group sneered, glancing at Miles. "And who's going to stop us?" "You." Miles squared his shoulders. "No. Wren will. And I'll stand beside her." It was more than defiance. It was a declaration. Every step he took, every glance he shared with Wren, told the world he had chosen something no money could influence. Love, loyalty, and justice. Wren's heart raced, but she didn't falter. In the shadow of power, surrounded by men who thrived on fear, she felt stronger with Miles at her side than she ever had with her land alone. Negotiations began, papers waved, voices rose. But Miles remained calm, his presence steadying Wren, reminding her that courage could outweigh intimidation. Every threat, every attempt to coerce, met a counterpoint, not with money, but with unwavering conviction. Hours passed. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the land. Slowly, the men in suits realized that the battle was not one of wealth or influence. It was a battle of integrity, courage, and heart. As the trucks finally departed, grumbling and defeated, Wren turned to Miles. "You risked everything for me, for us." "I risked nothing," he said quietly. "I risked what I've built because what I've found with you is worth more than any empire." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "And I thought I'd have to fight alone." "You never will," he promised. The sky darkened, stars beginning to prick through the twilight. Dry Creek seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, dust settling, wind calming. In that quiet aftermath, they finally allowed themselves to stand closer, hands brushing, hearts beating in unison. Love had found its place even in the shadow of power. And for the first time, both Wren and Miles realized that together, they were stronger than any threat, wealth, or betrayal the world could throw at them. Because sometimes, love wasn't about safety. It was about standing firm, shoulder to shoulder, even when the storm of ambition and greed raged all around. The early morning sun barely pierced the horizon, casting a pale light over Dry Creek. Miles stood alone on the ridge, the weight of his decision pressing down on him heavier than any boardroom battle he had ever faced. His empire, the sprawling ranches, oil contracts, and corporate holdings, was about to be surrendered. Every deal, every investment, every asset carefully built over decades would be relinquished to correct the sins of his father and restore what had been stolen from Wren's family. Wren arrived quietly, her boots crunching against the dry soil. She had heard the news before even reaching him, but the sight of Miles, still handsome, still commanding, yet carrying the visible strain of loss, made her heart tighten. "You're really doing it?" she said softly, a mix of admiration and apprehension in her voice. "I have to," Miles admitted, running a hand through his hair. "My father's mistakes. His greed cost your family everything. And now I have a choice. Protect what I built or protect what's right." Wren's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "And if you lose everything? I'll gain the only thing that matters," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. "Trust, love, justice, and maybe peace." They walked together toward the land, where lawyers and officials had gathered to finalize the transfer. Miles handed over the deeds, contracts, and papers with steady hands, each signature a symbolic shedding of the past. With each document, he felt a part of himself crumble, but with it came a strange sense of freedom. Wren watched silently, her heart torn. She had always admired his strength, but could she believe that this surrender was truly for the right reasons, and not another way to control her? The pride that had defined her family for generations made trust a fragile thing. Miles turned to her, voice low and intense. "I'm not asking you to forgive me, yet, but I'm asking you to see that I stand with you now, not behind money, not behind power, but behind what's right." The lawyers finished their work, handing Wren the final deed to her family land. Her fingers trembled as she held it, the culmination of generations of struggle resting in her hands. She looked at Miles, searching for the man she had come to know, the man beneath the wealth, the pride, and the empire. I don't know if I can trust you yet," she said, voice quivering. "But I see you. I see the man who chose what's right over everything else." Miles stepped closer, taking her hand gently. "Then let me prove it to you. Not with words, not with promises, but with every day forward." For the first time in months, a tentative smile crossed Wren's face. The storm of betrayal, greed, and power that had threatened to consume them both was beginning to clear. Redemption had a price, yes, but perhaps it was one worth paying for a love that refused to be bought. As the sun rose higher, Painting the dry creek valley in golden light, Miles and Wren stood together on the land that had once been a battlefield of legacies and lies. The empire was gone, but something infinitely more valuable had been restored. A chance to build a future together, rooted not in money or power, but in trust, respect, and love. In that moment, they both understood that true redemption wasn't about reclaiming what was lost. It was about choosing to do right, even when it cost everything. The sun rose over Dry Creek with a soft brilliance, brushing the dusty red earth with golden hues. The ghost town that had once been a landscape of sorrow and betrayal now stirred with new life. Horses grazed peacefully on rehabilitated pastures, fences were repaired, and the faint hum of construction echoed in the background as families returned to rebuild their homes. Miles stood on the porch of the newly restored Harrington homestead, hands in his pockets, watching the transformation unfold. The weight of the past, the greed, the betrayal, the loss had lifted, leaving room for hope. Beside him, Wren adjusted the straps of her leather bag, now carrying tools instead of contracts, symbolizing the new foundation they were laying together. "You've done more than fix buildings," she said softly, glancing at him. "You've fixed the mistakes. And maybe a few hearts along the way." Miles turned to her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I didn't do it for me," he admitted. "I did it for us, for the land, for what should have always been ours, and yours." Wren's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She had spent so long defending her family's legacy, guarding her pride and principles, that the thought of letting someone in had seemed impossible. Yet here he was, not with power or wealth, but with sincerity, respect, and love. They walked together across the fields that had once been barren, now thriving under careful care and commitment. Miles knelt to inspect a patch of wildflowers, tucking one behind Wren's ear with a gentle grin. "This land has second chances," he said. "And so do we." Wren laughed softly, the sound carrying across the valley. "I never thought I'd see this place bloom again, or that I'd feel safe, happy, with someone who could have had anything, but chose you," Miles finished. He took her hand in his, fingers interlacing naturally, as if they were always meant to fit together. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, letting the quiet of Dry Creek speak for them. No deals, no corporate threats, no suits in the shadows. Only the wind, the open sky, and the promise of a future they would write together. As evening fell, the sky painted in shades of amber and violet, Miles and Wren sat on the porch swing, watching the last rays touch the hills. The land that had once been a symbol of conflict and loss had become a testament to resilience, trust, and enduring love. In Dry Creek, empires had crumbled, secrets had been exposed, and mistakes had been atoned for. But the one thing that had flourished stronger than any fortune was the bond between Miles and Wren. The land had given them a second chance, and they would not squander it. Because sometimes, the greatest wealth isn't gold or property. It's love chosen freely, trust earned patiently, and the courage to start over. And in that quiet, unassuming corner of the West, Miles and Wren discovered that second chances could last a lifetime. Like, share and subscribe for more stories like this.